actually, let's go ahead. It's Mr. Krabs calling from Maryland, which is
Hey,
great. I don't know if it's because I said Mr. Krabs earlier, but
totally.
it maybe. Mr. Krabs from Maryland, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Oh, hey, Dan. I just wanted to talk about the chat poll that was put up. And I guess I don't quite understand. I mean, obviously, sex trafficking is terrible in this country and in other countries. I've actually seen some of it firsthand with my travels in the Navy, you know, in the Far East and all that. And I know it's a terrible problem. It's something that I wish we could just do away with, and maybe more legalization and regulation would be, you know,
Decriminalization.
if you will.
That was a harsh lead into the mic, but yes. More about I get you, Mr. Krabs. Go ahead. You have something more?
Yeah, actually, I don't know if it's like you know the whole yes no kind of aspect of the question. I don't know if it's like as seriously dire. I think if we just kind of like fix some stuff, you know.
Yeah, Mr. Krabs. I think, you know, part of the reason why we put that up there was because that's something that I feel I can talk about, and you pretty much said it. That yeah, it's you know, it is an issue. Obviously, it's a thing that exists, and I don't ever want to take away anyone's experience who has gone through something like this, because it's horrific. But the way that it is used as a weapon against pornography, legal, business, ethical, whatever that means, pornography in this country, and sex work, and the fact of people choosing to do these things, it gets conflated with trafficking.
Yes.
And the fact that trafficking is making someone do something they don't want to do for no money. Like it pretty much. And so, you know, and then when we call sex trafficking, that, well, that's saucy language. You know, there's a reason why Law and Order Special Victims Unit is the #1 brand of Law and Order that people watch, and there's marathons all the time, and it's because we're talking about sex crimes. And even just the salaciousness of the word sex, you know, it gets people interested. So sex trafficking is something that has really been co-opted and manipulated by the anti-porn crusaders of this country. And then it's been inflated and blown up to this degree to make it seem like this is a terrible thing that's happening in homes all over your neighborhood, you know, or cities, the city next to you. And when the severity of this problem, like the proliferation of this problem in this country, is way less than what sort of media is telling us anymore. And that 100% you are correct in this, the idea that if sex work was decriminalized, then the criminal aspect of sex work we'd be able to go after these people with much more efficiency and actually getting results, so that people who are put into this place, people who do not want to be doing sex work but are being forced to, will actually be able to go to the police without fear. Because right now, the way that they handle this is by arresting these people who are victims of a crime, rather than being able to save them from these situations.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, to add on to that, you know, the poll, and I want to try to do this. I said I would do this last week. We had some hiccups before we started this show, and I didn't get to it. But I want to start like reading our poll questions at the beginning so that I can tell the response at the end of the show. So we'll see if we can do that today. But the question that we asked, like you said, because it falls into more of your realm, Sinn, is there a sex trafficking crisis in the US? And this is a very complicated question. I feel like I've been saying complicated a lot because sex trafficking is notorious. It's notoriously hard to actually pin down a definition of exactly what that means, and also like how you count that. And it's also one of those things where it's like it's hard to count in the first place, right? So like, is there sex trafficking that happens in the US? Yes, absolutely. By some metrics, there are people that argue that sex trafficking is actually worse in the US than in almost any other country. But the broadness by which some of those definitions are used, and by which individual state actors actually report on that, muddy the waters a little bit in how we count sex trafficking. So of course, if we're talking about a situation where somebody is being used by a gang or something to, who violates their free will to be able to use something that nature, yeah, of course, we're nobody here is saying, oh, we're pro that. So
Yeah.
what we're interested in, of course, is the ability to freely being able to use your body in a way that you have full control over, and have direct control, that not only of the actual act, but also the income that comes of that,
Yes.
which is a much different conversation, right? And of course, that
Yes.
nuance gets lost when we talk about this in the space, especially right now, where there's a rhetoric going on of people saying, "Oh, they're grooming people, LGBT people are grooming kids into talking about sex and sexualizing them." When really we're talking about sex education. So again, yeah, it's complicated when we talk about this, but of course, we both share an interest in the liberalization of sex work, but on principle, right?
Hmm.
And do think that that's a good thing, and that may be counted as sex trafficking by some metrics, which is why that's such a it's people use this as a fear tactic almost,
Yes. As
Yeah.
a weapon almost,
Right.
against consensual sex workers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's why we
Absolutely.
that's why we say decriminalization and not legalization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I
For
mean,
sure.
I personally would probably go so far as to say legalization, because we're seeing a changing morality on certain types of drugs and all that, but that's
Uh-huh.
just me. Uh, but
Mm.
when you talk about, again, things are happening in the Far East and in a lot of other countries where whole families are devastated, where people do actually sell their kids. I would say that is far more of a serious crisis than what we have here in the U.S. Now, do some of those people filter into the U.S.? Absolutely, and then they have to deal with our legal system, which is horrendous at best. But
Yeah.
my I guess my next question is for Sinn, is like, what do you say to people? Because you have a vested interest in your work that you do. What do you say to people who say, "Oh, well, you just want this because you want to make more money, or you want to make better money, or something along the lines that, oh, this is a vested interest for you." How do you address people like that?
Well, I mean, yeah, economically, there's a vested interest because I am a sex worker. So, yeah, I would like to not be treated as a criminal. Yes. But, um, and so for everyone, it's different. A lot of people, do get into this work because they're like, I am going to make the most money and I'm going to die on the biggest hill of money. For me personally, like, that's not my motivation. That's not the main reason even why I do what I do. Um, do I make a living? Yes. And look at me, like, I'm actually going to be able to buy a house. I found it in this place where they're incredibly cheap. So I'm like making a lifestyle change for that reason. But, to know that I'll have shelter over my head, that's a great motivator for sure. But the other thing for me is that, like, I don't want to, I chose to wake up and do a job, a career with just something that I enjoy. I perform. I've been a performer my entire life. I love performance art. Like, I enjoy consuming it, I enjoy analyzing it, and I enjoy playing a role in it. I love what I do. So I found a way to take care of myself economically doing something that I love. So that's like my main motivation for it. It isn't even an economic factor. So then the next step would be me saying that, like, someone else is telling me what my motivations are, or they're telling me that I'm like biased about this particular issue. and that it's based on money, like that is the same thing as someone telling me that I am not allowed to use my body to make money because of whatever their hangups are about it. So, I would say to them, like, you really need to question the way you're looking at other human beings, that I'm not allowed to I'm not allowed to take an interest in this type of job. The only reason why I would is for these economic reasons. Like, I think that's the way that we look at work, really. Like, well, why are you working? Well, you're just making this money, so that's the only reason
Yeah.
why you have these beliefs or whatever.
Yeah, that's so funny. This idea of you have a vested interest because you're making money. Like, yeah, no shit. That's why you
Yeah,
do it. Like, I mean, obviously, it's not always about the money, right? But
Right.
it's like, yeah,
right.
that's a legitimate reason why a lot of people do sex work is because of the money that you and like, look, I
Yeah,
mean, we again, there is this cultural mores that we have these mores that say, oh, we can't do this because it violates some sort of principle that God has, and that's a
right.
deeply Christian, deeply West, not just Christian, but a Western in general idea, I guess, because
Right.
it also happens in Islam and other
Oh,
nations like that. I
yeah.
mean, pretty much worldwide, sex work has
Yeah.
always been this kind of taboo thing, but um, it's coming into the foray as a liberation for people, and of course, not just
Right.
women either, just but
Oh, yeah,
anybody
not
that
just women.
has the means to do it. And
Mhm.
people feel threatened by that, I think, because
Yes.
again, we're talking a lot tonight about power imbalances. There is
Yes.
suddenly a woman has the ability to make means of their own without the reliance on a man's income or anybody
Mhm.
else's income in a way
Mhm.
that can have exclusive control over. You don't have to
Yeah.
have a middleman anymore to do this. There are ways you can completely do it yourself, and that's a threat to people. That's
Exactly.
yeah,
It is a threat, and it's a threat to the status quo, and we
yeah,
know nobody likes that.
yeah,
But, at the same time too, I this is why I do always also say, like, this is not, my fighting against this concept of the trafficking rhetoric.
yeah.
It's not just like for myself. It's because people misunderstand what trafficking is when we conflate it with consensual sex work.
Mhm,
And so then actual victims are being harmed even more because we
mhm,
can't make sense of this.
yeah,
And I'd say that's the biggest harm that this rhetoric does,
mhm,
because these things do happen. And I will always say, like, I would never want to take the truth of someone else's experience who has lived through this away from them. It is an issue, no matter how small it is, but it is not. It's the conflation that takes away from the issue, that confuses things, that muddies the water. That it's like, people who are consenting to do this work, and especially on camera where we have model releases, we have consent forms, we have IDs, we have all of these ways of verifying that someone is choosing to do this. Also, we pay taxes. So then we have that on one hand, but then we have these crusaders saying, like, no, 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 they're being trafficked and they just don't know it. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. So you're telling me that you know more about my life, my choices, my experience than I do?
mhm,
Cool. Yeah, that's great. We love that when people speak for us and in front of us and about us without speaking
right.
to us. So that's where it becomes that problem, and that's my motivation. I just want I just want sanity, really.
Mhm. I remember the first time I talked about sex work. I think it was on this show, or maybe this was years ago, and I did not have a full grasp or understanding of the topic, and I wasn't restrictive about it, but I was like, oh, but wait, should we have some sort of systems in place to make sure that people are safe and protected? And yeah, of course we should, but like, I definitely still had these ideas of this is a thing that people do because they are desperate for money, or they are desperate, or something they otherwise would not do if
Right.
circumstances were permitted otherwise, and that is simply not true. Obviously, yeah, does that happen? People go to any job because they need money. That's people, that's just the thing. But
That's
like,
work.
yeah, that's what work is. But like, there, as the positive sex work movement has grown, it has shown me that, yeah, of course, people will do this for all kinds of reasons, some of
Yeah.
which aren't really my business, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
But if there doesn't seem to be any reason why they shouldn't be able to do it, as long as, again, they're in control of their own bodies doing this,
Mhm.
and they're fully consenting adults, then they should be able to do it. So anyway. I don't know what else to say on that.
Yeah.
You know.
Does that answer?
No,
Does that answer, Mr. Krabs?
Yeah, that definitely answers my question, and thank you for that. And I just hope that the rest of your callers are, honest callers.
I hope so too. I hope so too. Thank you for calling, Mr. Krabs, and giving us your question on that. Yeah, like that's the reason why we put that question in the chat is to see if people will make that conflation of sex trafficking versus sex work, because that's hot. That's hot right now. It's happening. So
hot takes
all day, every day.